Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nazir daf chet. Again, I will remind everybody that on Sunday we're starting a 4-part series, helping people build their Gemara skills. It's a third in the series of 3. We've already done 2 courses, one on Psachim, one on Gitin, on Tikkun Olam Sugyot, and this time it's going to be about accidental murderer. So I invite everybody to join. It's a great way to brush up on your skills. If you're going to do it not during the time of the class, it's going to be a Zoom class with breakout rooms and chavrut. I highly recommend. It's not the kind of shiur that you just want to listen to. The idea is it'll help, but the idea is to find yourself a chavrut or learn the study, use the study guides and it's not the same as study guides here, but the sheets with questions, guided questions and translations, etc., to try to work through the Gemara on your own, to learn how to learn Gemara. So highly recommended. If you're going to do it on your own, do it with someone else or on your own, but spend some time with a self-learning. That's the whole idea. In daf Yomi learning, I speak, you listen. That's a more passive learning. The idea is to have a more active type of learning. Okay, with that, we'll get started with today's daf. And today's daf is sponsored by Dalia Gamson in memory of Ephraim ben Yitzchak Shmuel. We're going to start today a new Mishna, and we're actually going to finish the first chapter of Nazir at the very end of the daf. It's a nice clean daf, clean start, clean end. Hareini Nazir kisal roshi, and what we're going to see in this Mishna, just to give you a little bit of intro to what we're going to do today in general, we're going to have, here's the structure of today's daf. We're going to have 4 different cases in the Mishnah. 2 of them we already discussed in yesterday's daf. They were quoted yesterday. The Gemara is going to deal with case number 2 only, really. And they're going to go in depth into case number 2, have a big question on it, and have a whole dealing with case number 2. Then they're going to bring 4 braitot at the end of the daf, which are similar. All of these cases in our Mishnah and similar cases in the braitot are going to be cases where, again, we've been dealing with for most of the chapter, somebody accepted upon themselves to be a Nazir with a particular language. And the question is, what did they mean when they said what they said? For the first time today, we're going to see they actually asked the person, what did you mean? Okay, which is interesting because we've been wondering why they didn't ask all along. We can try to suggest why in this particular case they asked, but it really begs the question why we haven't been asking in general. Okay, let's get started now that we know the structure. Hareini Nazir kisal roshi ukafal haaretz ukechol hayam. I'm going to be Nazir like the hairs on my head, like the dust on the earth, like the sand in the sea. Harei ze nazir olam. This person is a Nazir forever, which means what? Well, not like one long term of being a Nazir, but megalech achat l'shloshim yom. And this is not, I want to differentiate. This is not what we discussed previously, that if you're a Nazir olam, you get to take breaks here and there and trim your hair if you need, if it's bothering you. This is not what we're talking about. What we mean here is that when you said, I'm going to be a Nazir, like Sa'ar, like all these things, which are individual particles or individual hairs, etc., what you meant was, I want to take upon myself individual terms of being a Nazir, 30 days times infinity. Okay, so I'm going to be a Nazir for 30 days, X number of times, and X equals forever. Okay, so that's the way we're going to learn right now. The Tanakama holds. Not everybody agrees with this. So what we saw yesterday is really only Tanakama's opinion. So basically what's going to happen is every 30 days, you're going to shave, you're going to bring sacrifices, and then you're going to start your nazirut again immediately. Rebbi Yomer, you don't shave once every 30 days. No, you're a Nazir forever. And in fact, the Mefarish says, I think it's the Mefarish, he says, and you never shave. Okay, you can't. This is right. I know in the Dibor Matchil, Rebbi Yomer Megalech Echad L'Shloshim Yom, he says, right, that's where Rashi appears usually. It's not Rashi on the inner column. He says, when you say Sa'al Roshi, Chad Nezirut Aricha, you're saying, I want one long, right? Like God said, the Jewish people are like the sand, right? Which can't be counted. You want to be one long Nazir, exactly like Nazir Shimshon, but not like Nazir Shimshon. Why? Because Nazir Shimshon can become impure to dead people. You're not saying Nazir Shimshon. So you can become impure to the dead, but you're like Nazir Shimshon, that okay, you can never end it, basically. So that's the first case. But Rebbi disagrees with that psak in the first case. Rebbi Omer, ein ze megalech echad l'shloshim yom. No. I'm sorry, I was in the middle of Rebbi. I got lost for a second. Rebbi says you can't be megalech echad l'shloshim yom, but what Rebbi adds here is, when can you cut your hair? Once every 30 days, meaning what language could you have used which would have indicated that? Ha'omel, and here there's one word that's different here. If you say, I'm accepting upon myself nizirot. Nizirot means nazir plural. If you're saying many nizirot, then it's very clear that you meant many terms of nizirut, like the hair. And then it all depends what you say after that. Nizirot kisal roshi will mean till the end of your life. Okay? So we have this big disagreement, which is going to come up a little bit later in our daf again, about Rebbi and the rabbis, or Tanakama here, about if you say Hareini Nazir without saying Nazirot, but you use this infinite term, or something that can't be counted, or that's many more than the years of your life, then basically we're going to assume, according to Tanakama, you meant multiple terms, and according to Rebbi, no, you meant one long, endless term. Okay, and the main difference being, can you shave and do the sacrifices every month? Do you have to even? It's not, again, I want to differentiate it. When we said Nazir Olam before, we meant you're a Nazir forever, but when it's too much for you, you're allowed to cut your hair. That's something different. This is, you have to, every 30 days, you end your Nazirut time period, and then you start all over. And in order to do that, right, you can't start over until you shave and bring your sacrifice. So that's the first case in our mission. Case number 2. Hareini Nazir melo habayit o melo hakupa. I'm a Nazir like the way this house is full. Okay. By the way, the and let me finish one word and then I'll go back. Or the way this basket is full. Now this is a very unclear statement because there's two options here. Now, first of all, the Meiri says habayit is not actually habayit. Hey and chet, you could see why in Hebrew language, right? You could mix them up. It's just, right, a chet is a closed hay. So he claims that it's a chavit, which is a barrel, which is much more parallel, a barrel to a basket, because it's something that holds food rather than a house. You wouldn't necessarily always talk about a house being full of something. Anyway, whether you say house or whether you say barrel, it really all means the same. The issue here, and this is the case where bodkinoto, we ask you, what did you mean? Okay, now, there's two options. Im amal achat gedola nazarite. What I meant to say is, as we said before, I'm going to be a Nazir from here until Sof HaOlam, and you really just meant, right? This is going to feel like it's forever, even though you didn't really mean that, and you're just going to be a Nazir for 30 days. Likewise here, what you meant to say is, okay, even the Mefarish quotes, Aricha li milta kimelo abayit o kimelo akupa. This seems such a big task upon me, like the way a house is full, or like the way a basket is full, meaning really the focus is on a big basket or a big barrel or a big house or wherever you define it. But it's talking about the house or the barrel being one item. And then it's one big item, which again, we already learned, is Nazirut Achad Gedola, really is only 30 days. And you're just saying, I want to be a Nazir for 30 days. Okay. So if you say that's what I meant, then Nazir Shloshim Yom, great. But Im amal stam nazarti. But if you say, now here's an interesting thing. You said, oh, I just thought this was a good way to declare being a Nazir, but I didn't really know what it all meant. Okay? Wasn't sure exactly what I was taking upon myself. Seems a little strange, but okay. So now the question is, and here's this section is going to be quite complicated in today's stuff because this is the case we're going to deal with. In other words, we're going to be strict with you. Since you weren't clear about what you said, we're going to have to go the strictest way. Now, you might be saying, wait, haven't we been saying Safek Nazir Lahakel? Hold off. We're going to get there. Right now, we're just going to explain the law. And when we get to the Gemara, we're going to go in depth into talk about all the options and permutations. But basically, we're going to view it as if this basket was made up of mustard seeds, was full of mustard seeds. Now, mustard seeds, it's like sand, right? And then it becomes like the previous case. And then you're basically going to end up being a Nazir Kol Yamav. Now, there's two options of what this means. either Rebbi or the rabbis, right? The rabbis are going to say, Tanakama is going to say, that means you took upon yourself an infinite number of 30-day periods of Nazir, being a Nazir. According to Rebbi, it means you're going to be one long period of Nazirut. Okay, so that's going to be a debate. It doesn't say that in the Mishna, but that's obvious. We're going to get back to this case, so no worries. We're going to understand it much better as we go on. Case number 3 in the Mishna. Hareini Nazir mikam ba'ab makom ploni. This we already saw. I'm going to be a Nazir from here until the next town over, or until some faraway town. Omdim kama yamim mikam makom ploni. We assess how many days will it take you to get to that place. We estimate. Im pachot mishloshim yom. If it's less than 30 days, Nazir shloshim yom. We assume you took on the minimum term of being a Nazir, 30 days. Im lav. If it's longer, Nazir kiminyan hayamim. Then you're going to be a Nazir according to the number of days it takes. So if it took 6 weeks, you're going to be a Nazir for 6 weeks. Okay. We already learned yesterday that Rava says this Mishna is referring to a case where you're already on your way, right? Otherwise, it's more like Mikana Tzafa Olam, and maybe you're just saying, oh, this seems like endless, and you really just meant 30 days. Anyway, that's not going to be discussed because, again, case number 1 and case number 3 were already discussed yesterday, even though we didn't get into the machloket of Rebbi, but we did get into the case. Fourth and last case. Hareini Nazir kiminyan yemot hachama. I'm going to be a Nazir like the count, okay, it's a little hard to translate, like the counting of the days of the solar year, right, which is 365 days. But since you said the word kiminyan, which we're going to deal with later in the Gemara also, monet nezirot kiminyan yemot hachama. You're going to count 30-day installments times 365. Okay, so you're basically going to be a Nazir for 30 years, every month, ending your Nazirut for 30 years. Okay, you would have thought, right? It sounds like you're saying like the days of the year, and you really mean I'm going to be a Nazir for a year. But since you say Kiminyan Yemot HaChama, if you had just said Ki Yemot HaChama, like the days of the solar calendar, then it would have been 365 days. Since you say Kiminyan, like the count of, we assume you mean 30-day installments times 365. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda seems to corroborate, and we're going to get back to this, and that's why I'm pointing it out here, seems to corroborate this opinion that minyan means 365 periods of 30 days, because he says, Ma'aseh hayan, kevan sheishlim meit. There was a case, why he's bringing this, we don't know. There was a case where this happened, and as soon as he got to the end of the 30th year and finished his last one, as soon as he finished, he died. He dropped dead right then and never got out of it. Okay, why he's telling us this, we don't know, but we will point out in the Gemara that it's clear he agrees with this opinion. Okay, this opinion would seem to go against Rebbi, right? Because Rebbi would say, unless you say the word Nazirot, right? This is a sneak preview into what's going to be later. Unless you say Nazirot, it's not going to be distinct units of 30 days. Rebbi would view this as one long period of 365 days. Much shorter period than 30 years. Now we go to the Gemara. And as I said, the Gemara is going to deal with case number 3 and raise a significant issue, which you might have thought of already. If you said, I just said the words, and whatever the rabbis intended, whatever they determine is going to be from these words, that's what will be. To which we say, okay, well, we're going to make your life miserable, right? We're going to say, imagine as if it was full of mustard seeds, tons of them, and you basically took upon Nazirut. Again, let's just assume Tanakama right now, you basically took upon Nazirut for an infinite number of Nazirite terms. Every 30 days, you're going to shave, bring the sacrifices, and move on. Ve'amai, but why? Why don't we say that what you were saying was, imagine the basket is full of zucchinis or gourds, and let's say you could fit 50 in the basket, okay? Let's just go with the number 50. And then you'd have takanta. Why? Well, if it's 50, we can assume that, what did you mean? You meant, I want to be a Nazir for 50 days, like the contents of this basket. Why do we have to imagine it's full of mustard seeds, which are infinite? Maybe you meant Hishuim U'Deluim. Now, I want to point out before we move on something very important, which is, if you're strict Okay, now there's an issue here with being in a, okay, right now, let's assume, okay, we're assuming you didn't mean the house, you meant the contents, okay? Once you mean the contents, there's two options. Either you meant the contents filled with X, which is big, like gourds and zucchinis, in which case you be a Nazir for X number of days, and it's a finite number and you can get out of it. Or your suffix is you're a Nazir, and you're going to be a Nazir for 30 days, and then another 30 days, and then another 30 days for the rest of your life. Now, either which way you look at it, you're allowed to shave and bring sacrifices at least one time, right? Because what's going to happen? Let's talk about the options. There's going to be suffix and there's going to be vadai, right? Either we're in doubt or we're sure. Let's go with if we're sure, okay? If we're sure that you meant kishuim, so at the end of day 50, you're going to go, let's just guess it's the estimate is 50. End of day 50, you're going to shave, bring your sacrifices, and you're done. You're not a Nazir anymore. If it's 30 days, what are you going to do, right? If it's 30 day forever, at the end of every 30 days, you're going to bring a sacrifice, shave your hair, bring a sacrifice, and move on. Right? But if you're not sure which one, then this is what's going to be. Okay, now let's play this out. This is going to be important to understand. Hard to go forward without understanding this basic fact. At least we're going to understand it now in this way. If I'm not sure whether it was 30-day periods or one long 50-day period, when I get to day 30, I can't shave and I can't bring my sacrifices. You have to remember, what's the problem with bringing sacrifices and shaving your hair? There's two issues here. Number one, we've learned before, you can't bring chulin la'azara. If you're not obligated in sacrifices, you can't bring sacrifices. So on day number 30, it might not be the end. So of course you can't bring sacrifices. What's the problem with shaving? If you're a woman, it's not a problem. You can just shave your hair. But if you're a man, the Nazir, we didn't discuss this yet, but the Nazir shaves all of his hair, including the payot, right? There's parts of the man's face that he can't shave. So when you're a Nazir, though, you're commanded to shave all your hair, including the payot. Now, if you're not a Nazir or you're not supposed to finish your nazirut, then you're not allowed to shave those parts. So basically, you have two problems with saying, oh, just, finish your Nazirite term and start again. And, like, why not? There is no why not here because it's two halachic issues. So now let's go back to our case. So if you're suffix and you're not sure, so 30 days end, you might have to be for 50 days. So you for sure can't do anything. 50 days ends, you can actually shave, bring the sacrifices without a problem. Why? Because it's what we say in what we call it a mima nafshach. Either way, either it ended 30 days ago. Now your new term doesn't start till you finish your old term. Finishing your old term means shaving your hair and bringing sacrifices. So in terms of the 30-day option, maybe it was mustard seeds, so you can shave and bring sacrifices. In terms of your 50 days are now over, so you can shave and bring sacrifices. So either which way, you actually can do it then. However, right after that is where the problem lies. As soon as you're done, if you were kishuim and deluim, big items, you meant you're done. You're not a Nazir anymore. If it was the other option, the mustard seeds, then you're immediately a Nazir, and that one you can never get out. So while you can have one spot where you get out, and you can shave and you can't shave after that forever, because maybe you're not a Nazir. Maybe you meant kishuim and then you're not a Nazir anymore. That's really where the problem lies. So that's very important to understand for this next section. So the question of the Gemara is, why are we saying it's mustard? Why don't we say it's kishuim? So Amar Chizkiya b'machloket shnuya. Actually, this is a Tanaitic debate. And our Mishna follows one opinion. So if we kept saying Safek Nazirut Lahakel, we're going to say this Mishnah doesn't follow Safek Nazirut Lahakel. And then, by the way, since we paskin Safek Nazirut Lahakel, again, what does that mean? When we have a doubt, we're lenient. And then we just say, we actually don't even hold by this halacha in our Mishnah, because this Mishnah follows, we're going to see Rabbi Shimon. And we hold like Rabbi Yehuda specifically on this issue. And that's why the Rosh, we keep quoting, keep saying, Safek Nazirut Lahakel. So it's Rabbi Shimon. This Mishnah must match Rabbi Shimon's opinion. To Amal, Adam machnis et atzmo ledavar shesfeko chamor mivadao. This is what I said before, and now I'm going to explain. What does it mean, sfeko chamor mivadao? First, let's explain that part of the sentence, then we'll explain the first part. It's exactly what I just described. This person who's safek, whether it's kishuim or whether it's chardal, whether it's gourds and zucchinis or whether it's mustard, is going to be in a worse situation when he's in doubt than if we knew for sure which track. Either track would be easier. Either you can shave every month, or you can shave after 50 days and you'll never be a Nazir. But the doubt causes us to end up saying you can shave once and bring sacrifices once after day 50, but from there on in, there's no exit, right? There's no time where you can shave at all. You're stuck for the rest of your life growing your hair. So that is what we call sfeiko chamor mivadao. It's a fascinating concept that you're in a doubt because we're not sure which track we're on, but you end up, because you're in a doubt, you're in a worse situation than what would have been if option A or if option B. So comes Rabbi Shimon and he holds, when a person, this is a very interesting concept also, Adam machnis et atzmo ledavar shesfeiko chamor mivadao. This person, remember they said, I'm just saying it's stam. I just said whatever the rabbis make of my statement, whatever they think I meant is what I meant. So what Rabbi Shimon holds is when a person makes an ambiguous statement, which is what he did or she did, we're going to basically say, you were willing, when you said whatever the rabbis say, you were willing to take on the possibility that maybe, since you made this ambiguous statement, you'll end up in a situation of doubt that will be worse than what it would have been had you been clear, and that's okay with you, okay? What they're saying is this is an assumption about human behavior. If I say something ambiguous, I'm willing to accept whatever terms come with it, even though, again, there's option A, B, and C, right? A and B are the two possibilities of what I said, and C is something new. C is because you're in a doubt, you're actually going to be in a situation that's worse than A and worse than B, even though all you meant was either A or B. But what you're saying is, since the rabbis could come in and explain that we're not sure, and as a result, we have to be strict, I was okay with that. So when I made the statement, I was willing to accept A, B, or C, okay? Therefore, Rabbi Shimon says, since I was willing to accept it, and this is an assumption about human behavior, not necessarily me per se, who said it, but anyone is basically willing when, it's kind of like your fault for saying something ambiguous. So because of that, we assume you're willing to accept anything, and therefore, we're going to be strict with you. How does Rabbi Shimon know this? Because here's our case, and we learned this already in Masechet Nedarim. Tana. Hareini Nazir al manat sheyeh b'kli zeh mea kol. I'm going to be a Nazir if in this pile there's a certain measurement of mea kol, right? It reminds me when we were kids, we always used to estimate how many jelly beans, right? How many jelly beans are in the jar, right? The guy says, I estimate there's 1,000 jelly beans in the jar, and if there's 1,000 jelly beans and I'm right, I'm going to be a Nazir. Okay, something like that. V'halachu, and then they went to count the jelly beans. Halachu mitzao sheganavo shavad, but that pile of crops was stolen, and there was no way to check, or it got lost. We don't know where it is. There was no way to check. So now the question is, I took upon this statement, which, theoretically, I might have known. This wasn't an ambiguous statement. It was a very clear statement, but there was a possibility that we'd never get to count it or measure it. In which case, Rabbi Shimon Osil, that's exactly where Rabbi Shimon holds this. Since I made this statement and I knew it was dependent on something that would happen in the future that may or may not happen, this measuring, I was willing to accept upon myself Nazirut in any case. That's Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda, Matil, he says, no, you're not a Nazir. So Chizkiya says very simply, and we could have ended the sugya right here, our Mishna holds like Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, which again would mean, okay, if you notice there's a little, if you're in the regular Gemara, there's a little hey next to Rabbi Yehuda's position. That shows generally, usually it shows. That's where we see where the halacha is. The hey takes us to the Ein Mishpat near Mitzvah on the side of the page, really the Ein Mishpat, which tells us where can we find this halacha. Usually it's put by the person who we hold. And as I proved to you in the Rush, he's constantly saying something Nazir laha. So our Mishnah, we actually wouldn't hold that way. And we wouldn't actually say it's Chardal, we would say it's Kishuim, and you would estimate how many Kishuim could fit into that basket, and you would go from there and you'd be a Nazir for that amount of days. But Rabbi Yochanan complicates things, and this is going to take us most of the daf to get through Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda. I think the Mishnah even matches Rabbi Yehuda, which, by the way, makes a lot more sense. Because until now, our Mishnah would have been based on something Nazir lahakel. So why all of a sudden now we'll be using Rabbi Shimon's opinion? So, right, that's how we kept seeing the Rush explaining the Mishnah based on something Nazir lahakel. So he says the following. Afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda. I'm going to explain the Mishnah even according to Rabbi Yehuda. Because why? I'm going to distinguish between the case where somebody says, if there's 100 core, again, that's a measurement, in this pile, I'll be a Nazir. We're not going to treat you as a Nazir if it gets lost and we can never count it. But here, we're going to make you a Nazir. Okay? Here, and what are we going to do? Make you a Nazir like the Chardal. We're going to be strict with you. Why would Rabbi Yehuda say that? Why would he distinguish between the cases? Very simply. Hatam lo nachet leila nizirut. There it's a debate about whether you became a Nazir or whether you didn't become a Nazir. And you can even couch it in terms, the Shita Mekubetzet says this, of what's your status quo, chazaka. You're bechezkat, not a Nazir, unless proven otherwise, right? Innocent to proven guilty. You said, I'm going to be a Nazir if there's this amount in the jar or whatever, right, in the pile. And you never got to count it. So we just assume status quo, you're not a Nazir. So we can be lenient. But hacha, in our case, you said, I'm a Nazir like what's in this basket, which could have meant for 50 days, or it could have meant infinite numbers of Nazirut time periods, right? 30 days, 30 days, 30 days, 30 days, forever. So hacha nachet leila Nazirut, you're already a Nazir. You're what we call b'chezkat Nazir. Your status quo is you're a Nazir no matter what. Both options, you're a Nazir. Now you have to get out of it. That we're not going to be lenient about. That's different. In this case, Rabbi Yehuda has reason to be strict because you're already a Nazir. And as we said, it's complicated. You can't just get out of Nazirut. It means you have to shave. You have to bring sacrifices, which are forbidden if you're not actually obligated in them. Right? So to which he continues and he says, how are you supposed to get that Nazirut off of yourself if you're not sure? Which makes perfect sense. To which the Gemara says, but wait, am I low? Remember, I told you can get rid of the Nazirut at least one time, right? So he says, why not? You could go with in other words, and now we're going to do this Mamanasha, which is if you say it's kishuim, so after 50 days you can get out of it. And if you say it's very hard to read this line, okay, I'll tell you already, there's many different ways of reading this line. Some people have different versions, but I'm going to explain it in a way that I think makes the most sense, which is you basically, or it could be Nizirot Kabilale, time periods of 30, which means that right now at day 50, you can either get out of it because of the Kishuim, because you've gotten to day 50, or you did Nizirot. Like, what do you think? You did Nizirot? You can still get out of it if you did Nizirot, right? Hasakadata means what? What did you think? That you did 30-day time periods? If not Kishuim, then it's Kardal and it's mustard seeds, and then you need more? What's the difference? You can still get out of it. And then what's the brilliance here? Once you get out of it, because I told you, you can get out at day 50. However, now you might immediately go into another term of Nazirut. But that already, you're not status quo Nazir. Because now it's a question, not which type of Nazir am I? After day 50, when you get out of it, it's basically, are you a Nazir or you're not a Nazir? So it's no different. So basically, Rabbi Yochanan wanted to distinguish between the cases and said, one, it's, are you a Nazir or you're not a Nazir? And this one, you're definitely a Nazir. It's just a matter for how long. Comes the Gemara and says, that's not true. Because at day 50, you have an out, you can shave, do your sacrifices. After that is when the suffix kicks in. Since after that, the suffix kicks in, at that point, it's, am I a Nazir? Am I not a Nazir? And it should be exactly the same, and Rabbi Yehuda shouldn't agree. To which Rabbi Yochanan is pushed into a corner, and he has to say, now moving to Amud Bet, to Rabbi Yehuda sabra la Rebbi. Rabbi Yehuda must hold like Rebbi. What did we say? That this case, even though it doesn't say Rebbi disagrees, Rebbi obviously disagrees. You didn't say Nizirot like the kuppah, right? Like what the basket is full of. You just said like what the basket is full of. What would Rebbi say in this case? Rebbi would say that you're a Nazir. If you're a Nazir, if you said chardal, mustard seeds, you would be a Nazir from today for the rest of your life without any ability to shave and bring sacrifices, which basically mean, right? Ditnan, let's just keep reading. Rebbi Omer, you can't shave once every 30 days. Who is allowed to do this? This is just a quote from our Mishnah. I took upon myself terms of Nazirite, being a Nazirite, like the hairs on my head, like the dust in the earth, like the sand in the sea, which would mean that when you said, I'm taking upon myself melo hakupa, which means melo chardal, you actually don't have a way out on day 50. Because if Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbi, it's one long time period. You can never get out of it, which basically is going to go back to what Rabbi Yochanan said originally, which is Rabbi Yehuda will distinguish between that case and the case, is there in the pile 100 core? That's, are you a Nazir? You're not a Nazir. In this case, you're definitely a Nazir after day 1, and you have no way out now because maybe it's over day 50, maybe it's for the rest of your life with no way out ever. And then you basically have to say, again, let's just go back to the beginning. Chizkiya said very simply, our Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, not Rabbi Yehuda. That was very easy. And basically the cases are the same. But if you're going to say, right, the Me'akor and, the Me'akor and our Mishnah are the same thing. It's just, are you strict? Are you lenient? Very simple. Rabbi Yochanan says, I'm going to fit our Mishnah into Rabbi Yehuda. But in order to do that, he has to say that Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbi, that if you said Chardal, you meant one long term that never ends. If you said Kishuim, it would end at day 50. So you get to day 50, you have no way out, which basically means this is going to be different. Rabbi Yehuda is going to be more strict here because you're already in the status of a Nazir. And it's much harder to get out of being a Nazir out of Safek than it is to get into being a Nazir out of Safek. If it's a question, now we have this fascinating thing about Safek Nazir Lahaka, according to this option of Rabbi Yochanan, depends on your situation. If you're already a Nazir, to get out of it, we're not going to be lenient. But if you're not a Nazir at all, and we're questioning, did you take upon yourself Nazirut, then we'll be lenient. Okay, that sounds good also. If we had stopped here, it would be reasonable. However, we have another problem from here. Okay, if you use the study guide today, you can follow at least like what we're up to in terms of the indentations, like where we are in the doc. So now, but I'm trying to review it all the time so that you follow what we're up to. So basically, it's very simple, our structure so far. We had a question of the Gemara. Why did we assume mustard seed and not kishuim or deluim, gourds or zucchinis? 2 answers. Chizkiya's answer, Rabbi Yochanan's answer. Chizkiya's answer is, our mission is just Rabbi Shimon, not Rabbi Yehuda. So we're always going to be strict. And right, according to Rabbi Shimon. Second answer is, we're going to explain it also according to Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda would say here, like Rebbi, there's no way out. And since there's no way out, this case is different than the previous, than the one about the Me'akor, like if there's in the pot. However, we now have a big problem, which is both our Mishnah and a braita are going to show that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold like Rebbi. And then we're going to be a little bit stuck, although we will resolve this. But again, in order to explain Rabbi Yochanan, we had to explain that Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbi. But now we're going to say, wait, but that doesn't work. So that's going to raise a question back on Rabbi Yochanan. You make no sense. So now they're going to say the following. If you're Rabbi Yehuda, misavar like a Rebbi, does Rabbi Yehuda really hold like Rebbi? Look at our Mishnah. And I mentioned this when we were reading it. The last line of the Mishnah was the last case and then the last line. Hadran, it says in the Mishnah, Hareini Nazir kiminyan yemot hakama, like the counting of the days of the solar calendar, v'chule, etc. Right? You're going to be 365 periods of 30 days. So now, so Rabbi Yehuda, as we said then, he's agreeing with that situation. Now, would Rebbi agree with that? No. Rebbi would say, unless you said the word nazirot, plural Nazirite terms, you didn't mean plural Nazirite terms. You meant 365 days. So, Iyamar nazirot kamakabel ale. Iyamar bishlama. If you're going to say, this is a structure that means if you're going to say this, it works. You're already just saying, if you're going to say it works. But what it means is if you're going to say this, it'll work. If you think that Rabbi Yehuda believes that it was time periods of 30 days times 365, then the last sentence that he says makes perfect sense. That's where Rabbi Yehuda comes and says, since he completed, now there's 2 ways to read this, either because Rabbi Yehuda is saying he completed his terms, basically completed, you don't complete a year, you complete terms, right? All these terms, which isn't necessarily the case. You could have completed a whole year, but Right now, they're assuming shlim means completed terms, the 365. Also, it seems like he's trying to say it was a very long period of time, so much so that the guy ended up dying at the end of it. That being a Nazir for a year is not so long. And everything about Rabbi Yehuda seems to indicate that he meant 365 times 30 days and not 365 days. And that's why it makes sense that he doesn't hold like Rebbi, because Rebbi wouldn't hold that here. Now, if you think it was just 1 year he took upon himself, there's no such thing as hashlama. And the wording of Rabbi Yehuda makes no sense. That's question number 1 from our Mishnah. So number 1, it looks like our Mishnah doesn't, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold like Rebbi from our Mishnah. Ve'od misavar like Rebbi. And furthermore, we don't think he holds like Rebbi from another source. V'hatanya, it says in a braita, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hareini Nazir minyan hilkatei kayitz. I'm going to be a Nazir according to the count of how many piles of figs there are in here. Uminyan shibole shmita, or how many sheaves of produce that we cut on the Shemitah year. Monet nizir, these are just random examples. Monet nizirot keminyan hilkatei kayitz ukeminyan shibole shmita. What does it say here? He becomes a Nazir. This is Rabbi Yehuda who says it. Becomes a Nazir according to how many, we count how many piles of figs there were, how many, or, right, these are 2 different cases, or how many sheaves of produce there was in the field. And you're a Nazir based on that, meaning if there's 10 piles, you're going to be a Nazir for 10 time periods of 30 days. So again, he clearly doesn't hold like Rebbi. If he held like Rebbi, it would have had to have said Nizirot, and he didn't say Nizirot here. So we have 2 sources that seem to indicate that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold like Rebbi, which basically raises the question back at Rabbi Yochanan. How could you say Rabbi Yochanan agrees with our Mishnah? Because Rabbi Yochanan should be lenient here, because again, what's the point here? The point is after 50 days, either way, he should be allowed to get out of it, and then he's left with, are you a Nazir or you're not a Nazir, which is very similar to the 100 core. In which case, there should be a way out, and Rabbi Yehuda should be lenient, and since he's not, we assume there is no way out in day 50 because he held like Rebbi, that is 1 long time period. To which the Gemara answers, note something that's similar about the 2 sources we just brought to say Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold like Rebbi. Both of them, it has the word minyan, according to the count of whatever it is, piles of this, or bundles of this, or days of the year. But it said kiminyan, minyan shane, meaning Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you say, and we're assuming now Rebbi also, Rebbi in our Mishnah said if you use the word nizirot, it's going to be separate time periods, right? Separate terms. According to Rabbi Yehuda now, and presumably also Rebbi, also if you use the word minyan, that has the same connotation. So the count of means we're now going to have separate, distinct Nazirite terms. Well, okay, maybe you could say that with Rabbi Yehuda, but what's the Gemara going to say? Okay, we keep finding other sources that don't fit in with our answers. This is like, someone's catching you up in your answer. Sounds like a great answer, but it doesn't stand the test because there's other sources that disprove what you're saying. Does Rebbi really differentiate between minyan? Does he hold minyan is like nazirot? He absolutely does not. Look here. The Hatanya, it says in a braita, Hareini Nazir keminyan yemot hachama. That's exactly what we're looking for, right? If you're a Nazir, like the count of the days of the solar calendar, the solar year, monen nazirot keminyan yemot hachama. So according to Tanakama, you count nazirot, you count 365 terms of 30 days, like our Mishna. If you did it kiminyan yemot halevana, like the days of the lunar year, moneh kimei halevana, it would be 354 terms of 30 days. But Rebbi Omer, you ready for this? Minyan, right? What are you going to see? Rebbi holds ad shiomar nizirot alai kiminyan yemot hachama kiminyan yemot halevana. No, it's not distinct terms. It's 354 days and 365 days, and it's not distinct terms unless you said the word nizirot. So now we have a problem, because if Rabbi Yehuda is holding like Rebbi, and Rabbi Yehuda holds the minyan, right? Rabbi Yehuda clearly doesn't hold like Rebbi here, right? Rebbi doesn't hold minyan is different. So now we're stuck back with all those questions. How can you say that Rabbi Yehuda thought minyan is different if Rebbi doesn't hold that way and Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbi? Very simply, Rabbi Yehuda, savarlei kavatei b'chada u'paligalei b'chada. Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rebbi about one issue and disagrees with him about another issue. Savarlei kavatei b'chada nizirut kabeli laveh. Let's start from the second one. When it comes to distinguishing minyan or not minyan, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't agree with Rebbi. Rebbi thinks minyan doesn't mean distinct units. Rabbi Yehuda thinks minyan does mean distinct units. But when it comes to the issue of, are we going to be strict? And when you said, the case of chardal, is that going to be one term? Or is it going to be separate terms that last forever? Then he's going to agree with Rebbi about that. That we're going to view it, chardal case is one long term. And he disagrees with the rabbis about that. But when it comes to minyan, that's basically, he thinks in a regular case, you need the word nazirot, like Rebbi. And in the chardal case, you didn't say nazirot, so it's going to be one long term. But Rabbi Yehuda says, if you add the word minyan, though, minyan is like nazirot. And Rebbi doesn't think that. So we really don't have a problem. You can pick and choose what you agree with someone about, right? I agree with him about this. I don't agree with him about that. And that's the simple answer. So this is the end of our complicated sugya, which again, really is a very simple structure. We started with a question, why do we assume the worst, basically? And the first answer, very easy, we assume the worst because it's Rabbi Shimon who assumes the worst, right? He's going to be strict when it comes to Nazirot. According to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he tried to explain according to Rabbi Yehuda, and that got quite complicated. But in the end, we basically say, Rabbi Yehuda is strict here. I'm going to now summarize it very concisely. Rabbi Yehuda is strict because in this case, you didn't say the word Nazirot, and you didn't say minyan, which either one for Rabbi Yehuda would have meant separate, distinct time periods. Because of that, your suffix basically means, if you're in doubt, if it really was, this doesn't need, by the way, speko chamor mivadao. If you were a definite chardal, you would have been a nazir for your entire life. And if you were kishuim, you had said gourds and zucchinis, right? Kishuim is zucchini, salad is gourd. If you had said that, you would have been a nazir for 50 days and gone out. But since we don't know which one, and you're already a nazir and your status quo is nazir, you have to stay in it, and we're going to be strict with you. If it's a question of, are you a nazir or you're not a nazir, that's a totally separate question. And if it was 30-day periods or a 50-day period, you also would have gotten out of it. And then you would have been in the same suffix nazir lahaka. But that's not what the situation is, because he holds like Rebbi and thinks that this is one long term. That's the review. That was complicated. This next part is super easy. Now we're going to do 4 braitot, okay, which the first 3 discuss different terminology and how many times you would be a nazir based on those. And the last one gets into sarad of the house, leprosy in the house, which is a totally different topic, but you'll see why they connect. Tanu Rabbanan, Hareini Nazir kol yemei chayai, if I'll be a nazir for all the days of my life. Hareini Nazir olam, where I say I'm going to be a nazir forever. Hareze Nazir olam. That's a Nazir olam, which we already learned. After perhaps 12 months or maybe 30 days, we saw with Avshalom, you can cut your hair if it's too long. Again, trim it, not shave it. But if you say afilu mea shana, we saw this source already, by the way, afilu elef shanim, right? This is the case of kitzuta. You gave it an end date, even if you're never going to make it to that end date. Ein ze nazir olam ela nazir leolam. It never ends until that date, and you can't cut your hair at all. Tanu Rabbanan, hareini nazir va'achat. You say, I'm going to be a nazir, and then you say, and one. Monesh dayim, that means I'm going to be a nazir one time and another. So you have to do 2. If you say hareini nazir ve'achat, and then you add the word ve'od and another one, then monesh shalosh, you have to be for 3 time periods. Again, that would be 90 days. Vishuv, if you say and again, after you said those 3 terms, it would be moneh arbat, which the Gemara says, okay, come on, pshita. Why'd you add that last one? It's obvious. Well, ma'u detema vishuv kikulu v'haveli shit. Maybe vishuv means and all over again, meaning 1, 2, 3, and then again 1, 2, 3. But then you need 6. Hamash malan dilo. That's why it's going to tell you only 4. Tanu Rabbanan, hareini nazir. Now we get into Greek. Okay, hareini nazir. Sumchus says if you add the words hein, which is 1 in Greek, echat, then you do. If you say hareini nazir hein, that means I'm going to be a nazir for 1 time period. If you say digun, die, right, 2, then shtayim, you're going to be for 2. Trigon, they're basically saying, right, people use the language Greek then. So if you use trigon, try, right, you're going to be 3. Tetragon, 4. Pontigon, chamesh. Okay, these are all, we know these words. Okay, you're going to be 5 times. From here, they get into a braita about a bayit menugan. On this, we're going to end. Tanu Rabbanan, bayit agol, if you have a round house with no corners, or digun, or 2 angles in the house, strange kind of house, digun, trigon, or you have 3 angled house, right? Basically means 2 walls or 3 walls in your house. Pentagon, a pentagon. Okay, here you have the source for the pentagon in the Mishna. Okay, if you have a house that's the shape of a pentagon, Eino mitame b'negaim. You're not, that house can never be a leprous house. Why? Tetragon mitame b'negaim. Only a tetragon, a four-walled house. How do we know this? My time. Lamata hu omer kir kirot, lamalu hu omer kir kirot, harei kan arba. The psukim talk twice about the walls of the house. Now, walls means two. It doesn't actually say kir kirot. Kirot is made up of kir times two, right? It's plural. So because it says because it says kirot twice, and each one means two, we're going to assume four-walled house. And from there, they get it's only a house with four walls, four angles, and not if it's got some interesting, unique shape. It actually cannot be a bayit menuga. And we got to there because we were talking about using Greek, and therefore we quote another Mishnah which used Greek language. Interesting way to end our chapter. Hadran alach kol kinuyeh. And with that, we finish the first chapter. Mazal tov for getting here, and we'll start our new chapter tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.